The 1st of September 1939. Nazi Germany invades Poland, which marks the beginning of the Second World War. After defeating the Polish army, the Germans ruthlessly suppressed the Poles, whom they considered to be racially inferior. And in the weeks following the German attack on Poland, German SS, police, and military units shoot thousands of Polish civilians, including many members of the Polish nobility, clergy, and intelligentsia. The Nazis seek to destroy Polish culture and the Polish nation, and eliminate any resistance by arresting and murdering Poles. Following the German invasion of Poland, concentration camps become central to Nazi brutal policies, serving as sites of imprisonment, forced labor, and mass murder. One of the Poles arrested by the Germans and sent to a concentration camp is a man who, after his liberation, will take brutal revenge on an innocent German family, killing all its members. His name is Peter Cemy. Peter Cemy was born on the 18th of June 1918 in Tarnopol, then part of Austria-Hungary. After the end of the First World War, which lasted from the 28th of July 1914 to the 11th of November 1918, Tarnopol was briefly part of the West Ukrainian People's Republic, but later became part of the Republic of Poland. Between the two world wars, the Polish state was challenged with large national and ethnic minorities that amounted to about a third of the population. The Polish national camp generally defined the Jews as an alien ethnic and religious element. Although among certain Polish intelligentsia and liberal circles, there was a tendency to integrate the Jews. The masses of Jews continue to live in separation in their own neighborhoods and generally were not favorably regarded by the surrounding population. In the second half of the 1930s, anti-Semitic fervor reached new heights. When Nazi Germany invaded Poland on the 1st of September 1939, Peter Cemy was 21 years old. In the weeks following the German attack on Poland, German SS, police, and military units shot thousands of Polish civilians, including many members of the Polish nobility, clergy, and intelligentsia. In the spring of 1940, the German occupation authorities launched AB-Aktion, a plan to systematically eliminate Poles considered to be members of the leadership class. The aim was to remove those Poles seen as most capable of organizing resistance to German rule, and to terrorize the Polish population into submission. The Germans shot thousands of teachers, priests, and other intellectuals in mass killings. Nazi officials sent thousands more to the newly built Auschwitz concentration camp, to Stutthof, and to other concentration camps in Germany, where non-Jewish Poles constituted the majority of inmates until March 1942. Hitler intended to Germanize Poland by replacing the Polish population with German colonists. Only enough Poles would be retained as were needed for basic labor. The rest would be driven out or killed. While the war lasted, however, Germany needed Polish labor. Nazi officials imposed a labor obligation upon able-bodied Poles that came to include children as young as 12. The German authorities dictated where and how Poles were employed and could conscript Poles to perform labor in the Reich. Police grabbed Poles off streets and trains, from marketplaces and churches, and in raids on villages and neighborhoods to fill labor quotas. German officials sent Poles who tried to avoid labor conscription to concentration camps and punished their families. Between 1939 and 1945, at least 1.5 million Polish citizens were deported to German territory for forced labor, and hundreds of thousands were also imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps. Peter Cemy was one of the Poles detained by Nazi officials and sent to a concentration camp, from which he was liberated by the Americans at the end of the war in May 1945. He had most probably been imprisoned in the Mauthausen concentration camp, located in Upper Austria, about 12 miles east of Linz. It is estimated that the Germans killed between 1.8 and 1.9 million non-Jewish Polish civilians during World War II. In addition, the Germans murdered at least 3 million Jewish citizens of Poland. After the end of World War II, delinquency in the majority of the European states took on exceptional aspects. On the first days after the liberation, resentment and demand for punishment burst out in Allied countries against those who collaborated politically or economically with the enemy. The authorities were compelled to arrest those who had committed such crimes against the security of the state, and those whose activity was of a suspicious nature in order to prevent the population from committing assault against their lives or their property. Masses of arrests took place in all occupied countries, and the authorities had to quickly organize concentration camps or to transform buildings into provisional penitentiaries because the existing prisons had no room for the mass of arrested people. This overcrowding was so acute that the situation became critical, and as a result, judiciary and penitentiary authorities were compelled to relax the punishment of a considerable number of prisoners under restraint for common law crimes. During and shortly after the war, the police was very ineffective against certain crimes due to the absence of weapons, vehicles, and other technical material. Identification of a certain number of delinquents was made difficult by the false identity papers and the lack of communications, as telephone and telegraph lines, as well as stations, were almost completely destroyed. A great many of the parachuted weapons destined for the resistance forces fell into the hands of individuals inclined to crime, or of recidivists, while the law-abiding citizens and the police had no weapons for their own defense. Robberies, assaults, bank and post office burglaries with the use of arms were committed on a large scale. In this atmosphere of lawlessness and chaos, Peter Camy, liberated from a concentration camp, spent his first months of freedom drifting across post-war Germany. On a snowy winter night of December 1945, he found refuge and a meal in the home of a German family, consisting of a husband, wife, and a daughter. They fed him and gave him a bed. After they went to sleep, however, Camy found a hatchet and brutally murdered the couple and their young daughter in their beds. Shortly after, he was arrested by US occupation police. Since he had committed these crimes in the US occupation zone, Camy was under the jurisdiction of the US military under martial law. On the 6th of August, 1946, an American military court found him guilty of 3 counts of premeditated murder and sentenced him to death. Camy was 28 years old when he was executed by firing squad at Landsberg Prison in Allied-occupied Germany on the 21st of March, 1947. Camy was shot without a hood as he declined to wear one. Because no one claimed his body, he was buried in an unmarked grave in the cemetery next to the Spurtingen Chapel, located close to the Landsberg prison. Camy, who survived the horrors of Nazi concentration camps, thus ended up being buried in the same cemetery as 300 Nazi criminals of the worst degree.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.